Welcome back to my channel, guys. Today I'm going to be talking about some things that I've learned from a 70-year-old attorney. So I've been working with this attorney for around a year now, and we've been able to spend a lot of time together, storytell, learn about things, and etc. A little bit about him. He is 70 years old exactly. He's Italian. He comes from a very poor background, full of factory workers. Growing up, all of his friends would tease him about getting an education. Nobody thought that he could do it, but he ended up getting a full ride to his university. So that's how he was able to get an education. And now he enjoys playing lacrosse, hockey. He's always been a super hard worker and super dedicated to his career. Now jumping into the very first lesson that I wanted to mention to you guys today. So around December of last year, we were all packing up our offices because we were getting ready to move downstairs into the new office, which we're at right now. And I was just doing my own thing. My coworker was doing hers. We were all packing up our own offices. And the end of the day came when he walks into my office with a box in his hands. And it's a normal size banker box, not too big, just your average size banker box. He walks in with his banker's box, and I can tell that he has sort of like an emotional expression on his face when he says, well, there are 35 years of my life in this box. 35 years of my life fit in this banker's box. And I look into it, and it's all just awards, trophies, normal things that you'd see from an attorney who has over 35 years of experience. And it kind of just hit me there. I was like, wow, this man's life is literally in a box. You're probably thinking, well, what's the lesson here? And for me, it was really thinking more about what I wanted my future to look like and what I would want that banker box to be filled with. What do you want your life to look like when you look into that banker's box when you're 70 years old? It's been 3 months since that happened, and I still think about it all the time, because as an attorney, you're gonna be dedicating a lot of your time to your career and your clients, and it's a very, very, very demanding job, no doubt. To me, he was everything I wanted to be and more, and for him, it was like, it just amounted to a banker's box sort of thing. The sun has come out, but I did want to mention that's not to say that he's unsatisfied with his life in any way. It was more so a point where I was thinking to myself what I truly wanted my life to look like in the future, because you can have all the money you want in the world and retire with $8 million in your bank account, but what did you really do with your life? Did you just work the whole time? Or did you spend any time with your family? Are you satisfied with that? That was the first lesson. That wasn't really a lesson. It was more so food for thought. I honestly hadn't thought about how I would feel about my life when I was 70 years old, looking back at everything, and being super young right now. I still have a lot of time to change how my life is going to play out. So that was a very shocking moment for me to see. I do also want to mention that the attorney has never ever expressed any sense of regret about the career that he chose or about anything that he did, honestly, because he lived a very good life. He lived in a nice house that had acres of land. They had a pool, a basketball court, a gym. They would host parties every year. They just really lived a good life. In his eyes, the banker's box was just a representation of how fast time flies. And in my eyes, it got me thinking about what I wanted my banker's box to look like. Moving on to point number 2, which is that he says that you should always trust, but you should always verify, like Ronald Reagan said. And he actually said this last week, but it didn't really hit me that this could apply to life in general. The way that it came up was that we were preparing for a trial for one of our biggest cases, and the opposing counsel had a doctor prepared to be an expert witness, and in this case it was an IME. And we had just found some evidence, and we had shown it to the opposing counsel as well as published it on the e-filing portal as an exhibit for a rebuttal. And this exhibit that we had posted was an old deposition of that same doctor that the opposing counsel was going to use in trial. But it was a deposition where that doctor was saying the complete opposite of what their argument was in our case. So in the case that their doctor had said the complete opposite of something he said years before, we could use it for impeachment purposes and basically attack his credibility. It was funny because after we had published that as an exhibit, the opposing counsel uploaded a motion to continue. And a motion to continue is just a motion to try to get the final hearing date moved a little bit over. So he had done this motion to continue to push the final hearing a little bit further back, but still within the 210-day deadline. And in the motion to continue, he had mentioned that the reason why he needed to extend the date was because his doctor was in the hospital. And he didn't explain what type of illness he had or what was really going on, but that was his reason. And my attorney wrote a response to that motion to continue, which he discussed with me afterwards, where he wrote that Ronald Reagan says trust but verify. So even though he had no reason to truly disbelieve what the opposing counsel was saying about his own doctor, he would still like to trust but verify that he is actually sick in the hospital and not that they're just trying to buy time to find another argument or to expand on their argument or defense, etc. So I thought that that was a really good lesson to learn, because it doesn't only apply to trial and to the law or that career, but it also applies to real life. I find myself trusting everything that somebody says, and I never really doubt it. That was the second lesson, which was a little bit shorter. So moving forward, I'm not going to distrust people, but I'm definitely going to make sure that what they're saying is true, because I haven't been applying that in my own life. And okay, so the next thing that I learned from him was more so about work ethic and what it means to be a truly hardworking person. He's always telling me that showing up is half of the battle. As soon as you just take the action and you go to the office, it's gonna come easier to you to actually do the work. Another small thing he taught me is that you're always gonna be scared, or like you're always gonna have some sort of anxiety, or in general, you're always just gonna be nervous. Like everybody is nervous about something in life. And especially when it comes to, for example, like saying your opening statement, closing statement, cross-examination, you just have to learn how to keep it under wraps and kind of put your game face on. Actually, he told me that he uses breathing techniques, which is interesting because even after 36 years of being an attorney, he still has to use breathing techniques. That just made me feel better, because as somebody who has had a considerable amount of anxiety in their life, it makes me feel like it's not the end of the world. You can move past that and you can still do the things that you want to do. A huge thing that I admire about this attorney is that he truly puts his all into every single piece of work he does. He always says, you know why lawyers and doctors are paid the most? It's because they cannot make any mistakes. And he truly shows this. Like every day he comes in, he's always on his A game. Even during lunch, he will be researching on his lunch break. He also emphasizes that you should not be scared of debt. It's an investment in yourself. It's gonna get paid off. He's taken many loans in his life, large loans, hundreds of thousands of dollars. He's paid them all off. That for me personally also really made me feel better, because talking to people who are afraid of debt but who have never really taken on big amounts of debt can kind of make you very, very risk averse and feel like you don't want to get into debt, and it's the end of the world, and it's this big thing that you should be afraid of. And it's very different to talk to somebody who has literally taken on hundreds of thousands of debt, came from a very poor background, is a super hard worker, but also has had a good life, and he was able to conquer all of that debt, pay it back, live an amazing life, be satisfied. It really changes your perspective, especially nowadays. If you go on, for example, the thread on Reddit, and it's called r/law school admissions, the majority of the posts are all about debt. Should I go to my dream law school? I have to pay X amount. Or should I go to this not really known law school who's giving me a full ride? And everybody's saying, go to the one with the full ride, this, that, and the other. But the choices that you make in life, it's like it's going to affect how your life is going to play out. So if you're not willing to take on the debt for this super amazing law school, then you're probably not going to get the same opportunities had you chosen that law school. I'm done going off on that tangent about debt. It's just something that I feel like people should be less scared of, and sure, it should give you anxiety. I mean, it's a big responsibility to take on debt, but it doesn't mean that you should just avoid it at all costs. That's like avoiding the highway just because you don't like how fast cars are driving. You either know how to handle it and you get somewhere faster, or you avoid it at all costs and you can't even get to some places in the world. The next lesson, and I think probably the last one I'm going to mention in this video because I have to go to work, is that you are your own brand. This one's really, really interesting for me, because although people are always like, oh yeah, you're your own brand, like the way that you portray yourself is the way that people are going to see you, the way that you think about yourself is the way that people think about you. you hear it all the time, but you don't really put it into action, or at least I didn't. The attorney that I work for has emphasized it to me so many times that it's very important that you pick something where it kind of becomes your niche. And it sounds weird because you're kind of looking through it through like these goggles of life as a game. And I'm not trying to get into that. Life isn't a game, but it's also like, if you choose one thing to be your niche, as how will people remember you, then people will always remember you. And I'm not talking about on social media or anything. I'm talking about in actual social gatherings where you have to network and make connections. The attorney that I worked for would always use lacrosse and like horse riding as his thing. So every time that he would go to these workers' comp events, he would always say, I'm the guy who plays lacrosse, and I'm on this lacrosse team, and I play hockey, and I like horses. He always kept up to date with football, things that guys talk about. And so he said that this was a huge part of why he was able to get so many referrals, is because people knew him as that guy who played lacrosse, but is also a great guy and knows about football and is fun to talk to. Like, he plays lacrosse. Like, that was his image. And it sounds silly, but according to the 70-year-old man, it works. And he also told me that he was trying to craft his son into also falling under that, but his son ended up taking up a different path. He's still a very successful guy. I think that's very true, and I don't think that a lot of people even do it that often, because I went to this one event a couple of months ago, and it was like a young lawyers event, but there were paralegals there as well. And as I was talking to all of these people, honestly, nobody really stood out. Nobody stood out in the way that I remember really much about them, but had somebody talked about their hobby, what they do on their free time, instead of just constantly talking about work, I probably would have remembered them, and it probably would have brought me closer to them and made it feel more personal. I thought that was interesting. And on the topic of branding and everything, he also had this list. He doesn't use it anymore, but when he was a young attorney, he compiled like this list of doctors, attorneys, people who could help the business basically. And he would send out like wine every year, or he would send out some sort of food thing for the holidays. And I noticed also, even last year for Christmas, we got a lot of stuff from other attorneys and other doctors and all this stuff. It's its whole community in its own. This can also apply to like any career, honestly, real estate, especially for networking. How do you want to separate yourself from the crowd? And I think personality is huge. But those were just some of the things that I've learned since working for him. But there are definitely a lot of other things that he's taught me, mostly in his philosophical lens. But yeah, I hope you guys enjoyed that. I hope you guys have a good day. If you like coffee, make sure make yourself a cup of coffee. Enjoy your day. Life's short. You never know when it's gonna end. Not to be depressing, but it's true.